Let's see the definition of context. Elements under the same parent node belong to one context, right? Elements under the same parent node belong to one context. And if a field appears multiple times in different structures, then it is referred to as a context change for the field. Right? Still confusing, right? Let me show you practically in our message mapping. Let's generate the queue for employee ID again. So we have employee ID here. Let's try to generate a queue. Now, let's try to understand this fully. So we have 1 and 2. These are the actual values, right? So in our incoming message, we have employee ID here and the employee ID here as well. So if I ask you what is the parent node of this employee ID, this employee node, right? So employee is the parent node of the employee ID. So the employee ID belongs to this employee context. All these elements, all the elements under this employee belongs to one context. We have seen the definition, right? Elements under the same parent node are called as one context, belongs to one context. So all these elements belongs to the employee context, and all these elements belong to this employee context. So I'm talking about two different contexts here, two different parent nodes, right? So this is one parent node and this is another parent node. So if I ask you 001 belongs to which context, which parent node? For this employee node, and 002 belongs to which parent node? To this employee node, right? So there are two different contexts per employee ID. Field name is same. The field name employee ID is same, and the parent name, node name, employee is also same, but they belong to two different parent nodes. This employee ID belongs to this employee parent node, and this employee ID belongs to this employee parent node. So there are two different contexts. So how Q represent these context changes? How Q tells us there is a context change? Simple. So the white backgrounds are the actual values. This is the start of the queue. This is the end of the queue. Whatever we have in between with a grayed out area or the context changes. Forget about the values. Forget about the value in the grayed out area. This grayed out area simply tells there happened a context change. So this employee 001 belongs to one separate context, and this 002 employee belongs to another context, right? So understanding these contexts is very, very important for our next node function manipulations. So this is how a queue displays all the values of a field along with the context, okay? Let me try to use this sample XML to achieve my requirement. So let's discuss the requirement now, okay? So I have this sample XML, and let me try to pull the sample output as well and the different view. Okay, now we have the source and the target, and this is my source. Source has employees at the root tag, and the target has employee email export. The requirement is simple. For each employee, we should collect all the email addresses and place them in a single structure, place them under email list. So this Rahul has two emails, right? One is work, one is personal. Doesn't matter. So he has two email addresses, and I want them in a single node. I want them under email list, right? So same happened to the second employee. Since Sarah has only one email address, I will need this email under the email list. We will have only one email for this employee. So what is my requirement? I have to collect these values, these email addresses, these multiple email addresses, and place them under a single list, a single node, email list node. Okay, let's see how to achieve this using our message mapping. Let's see, if you don't know about context handling, we will map them directly to the email, right? So let's see how it works and how to correct it, how to achieve this requirement properly, right? Let me remove all the mapping. I will explain from the start. So we need to map employees root tag to employee email export. So I would like to see only one root tag, which is employee email export, right? For each employee, if we have multiple employees, we need to generate multiple employee output structures as well. So I would like to map this employee to this employee. So observe the occurrences, one to many. So which means employee is a mandatory field and it can appear any number of times. Same goes to the employee as well. It can appear, the target employee, it can appear any number of times and it is a mandatory field since we have min occurs as 1. Clear, right? We need to map employee ID to this employee ID, and we have a little logic here. The first name, last name, we need to concatenate for the full name. So it is pretty straightforward. We have already discussed this. I will consider these two, and we have concat function, right? I will search for concat, and string 1 goes here, and this is the string 2 and here. So for delimiter, I will just use a space. I need space between first name and last. Okay, it is clear. And now comes the actual part. So I would like to create an email list with all the emails of each employee. Let me try to do how we do without knowing the context handling. Okay, I have to take the value, right? So I need to map this value to this email. So let's try to map this email to email. Okay, done. Let's try to simulate this one. One way to test message mapping is using simulate. What is the other way? We have already seen displaying queue. So whenever you display queue, you test the particular node. You test the logic for one particular node. To test the entire XML payload, we have to use the option simulate. To test one particular node logic, we can use a display queue, right? So I'm going to close this and simulate. Since we have already imported this sample XML, it loaded it properly here. Let me try to test this. So we have employee ID and full name Rahul space Krishna. So that is working fine. Let's look at the payload for another employee 002 and Sarah space Thomas. So these two field logics are working fine. Let's look at the actual thing. Email list. So we have one email for Rahul Krishna, and let's look at the emails from input structure. We have two emails, right? So let's look at under that we have work and Rahul Krishna at company. So it map this first email address to this email, and we have another email for the same employee which is personal email, but it didn't map it here. It only consider one email address. Let's scroll down and see what happened for the second employee. So this is for first employee and this is for second employee. You can see for Sarah Thomas, it mapped Rahul Krishna's personal email. So is this looks correct? No, right? So we need to map. What is my requirement here? We need to map these two email addresses to this list, right? For one particular employee. And for next employee, we should map this email address to this one. What output we get? We get the first hit of email Rahul Krishna @ company here, and then the personal email in the Sarah Thomas. So this happens when we don't understand the context properly, when we don't handle the context properly in message mapping. So what actually happened here? Let me try to generate queue for this particular employee field. So where we have our logic, so this is the employee, and let's look at the logic. So we used straight one-to-one mapping, direct mapping. Let me try to generate a queue for this value, display queue. So observe this. We have Rahul Krishna at company in one context. So all the white spaces are the values, and all the collection, so everything between these grayed out areas will belong to one context. So Rahul Krishna belong to one context, and this personal email belongs to another separate context. There is a context change between work email and personal email. Understand this? There is a context change between work email and personal email. And then there is a context change for Sarah Thomas, for another employee. So this makes sense. For different employee, yes, there should be a context change. But these two email IDs belongs to one employee. But why did it created a context change? Why it assumed that these two email addresses belongs to different structures? But if you look at the payload, these these two email addresses belongs to which context? Belongs to this same employee, right? But the parent node for the value is this email, and for this value is this email. So there is a context change. There is a change in parent node, right? So it treated it as different records, different employee data. So what I would like to do here is look at the context. So where the context exists for this value, let me show you the context first. For the value field, I will simply hover my mouse, and if I place my mouse on the value, you can see name is value, that is right. XPath is employees slash employee slash emails slash email slash value. So that is the XPath we use to get into the value, right? Value node. Clear? And observe this context. So where is the context? What is the context for this value? Employees slash employee slash emails slash email. So the context of value is email. So it is very clear here. So the context of value is email. What is the parent node of value? It is the email. So this value belongs to this email. So what we should do now? We should tell the message mapping that these values belongs to one employee. These values belongs to, these email addresses belongs to one particular employee only, right? So we have to use context handling in this situation. Let me show you how to manipulate the context. So for value, if we click on this three dots, we have context. So click on here and it says email. So this is the current context of the value. So it belongs to the email context. But if I change the context to emails and simulate it, I will explain what happens. Test. Now let's see the email list. Here you have two emails. So this is what we expected, right? We have to see two emails which belongs to the employee Rahul under the same email list. For the second employee as well, it has his or her email address. So what actually worked here? What actually happened here when I changed the context? So before changing the context, this value belongs to this email node. So how message mapping works is based on the queues only. If it has a context change, it will skip. It will consider that it is a different record. It is a different message. So it will skip the processing and goes to the next context. So, but when I change the context to emails, so under emails, how many email addresses we have? How many values we have? We have 2 values. So it will loop for each value and it will read those values. So when we have the context under the email, it can only see this part. The message mapping can only see this part only. How many values we have under this part? Only one, right? But if I change the context to emails, the message mapping can now see this entire section. So how many values we have in this entire section? We have 2 email addresses. So it map those 2 email addresses. So think of the context, like how message mapping sees your incoming message. So if I have the context of this email as my context, it can see only this parent node, only this structure. If I change the context to emails, it can see this entire node, this entire email, entire multiple emails. If I change the context to employee, it can see all the nodes under the employee. If I change the context to employees, it can see the entire XML document, right? So let me try to give you another example. I will go back to my notes. So elements under the same parent node belong to one context. We have seen with the email addresses, right? If a field appears multiple times in different structures, different email addresses, different employees, then it is referred to as a context change for the field. The grayed out areas are all context changes. Let me show you a sample queue. Okay, so this is the sample XML. Here we have root tag. Under the root tag, we have multiple A nodes. So all the node names are same. But under the first A, we have 2 items. Under the second A, we have 4 items. Under the last A, we have 1 item. So if I generate a queue, for A, what will happen? So for this is the initial context and this is the queue end. So this is the queue start and queue end, the first and last grayed out area. So that is fine. And all the fields which are written using white spaces with white space backgrounds are the actual values. For the first A node, we have 3, 2. We have 2 items. And there is a context change. Since the parent node changed, there is another A node. There is another different node. So there is a context change. And then we have 10, 11, 43, 2. So all these items belongs to this context. And then we have a context change again. And this item is placed as a separate context. So this is how the queue deals with message mapping logics. Whenever you understand context, you can easily use these node functions to handle complex logics, right? I hope you understand the context and the queues. We will continue more on the next upcoming video.